Well, some of you may remember that when I was growing up, I wanted to be a rock star. I did a speech about it. And I started a band, I played in a bunch of clubs, right, for a few years. I really tried to make it, right, as a musician. And then after doing that for a few years, it began to occur to me that this is really hard. Right? So I began to think about what I might do if I didn't make it as a musician, right? My backup plan. So after careful thought, right, put a lot of time into it, I decided that if I didn't make it as a musician, my backup plan would be to be an artist. Didn't get it. Because if making it as a rock star, right, is a long shot, trying to make it as an artist, right, the odds are just so much more in your favor, right? So when originally I entered college in the mid-'80s as an economics major, right, something totally different. And I knew that I didn't want to spend my life in an office. I wanted to do something creative. So something that maybe I could still be around music somehow. So my first plan was to, maybe I could be a designer, right? I could design album covers. I thought, that's it's a cool thing, right? I'd still be around music and it's creative. But if I was going to be an album designer, economics probably wasn't the best major. And I still remember my first economics class. It was macroeconomics, and it was taught by Dr. Aziz. He was this incredibly serious, intense Egyptian man, right? Really, really intense, right? Just emotionless. He was sort of like a cross between Mr. Spock from Star Trek and Darth Vader. In fact, Mr. Spock seemed like Sammy Davis Jr. compared to Dr. Aziz. Right? He had this intense stare, right? He was very intimidating, right? Like he could just see right through you when he was staring at you. And his lectures were just boring, right? They were so boring. They made a Toastmasters business meeting seem like a night out on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras. Right? That's how dull they were. But so I knew I was going to have to change my major. Right? I was going to have to get out of economics. I was going to have to change it to either art or design or something like that. Now, anytime you go and you tell your professor that you want to drop out of their subject, you want to change your major to something else, you know it's not going to go well, right? Because they take it very personally, right? It's like you're saying to them, this subject that you love passionately and you spent your entire life studying, you're basically saying to them, I have zero interest in it, right? no interest whatsoever. It's like a knife in the heart to them, right? That's how they see it. But I knew I was going to have to do this change, right? I was serious about it. I was going to make the switch. And to make the switch, I was going to have my academic advisor sign off on the transfer. And as luck would have it, my academic advisor naturally is Dr. Aziz, Mr. Spock. And I'm absolutely dreading having this conversation with him, right? But I worked up the moxie to go to his office one afternoon. And I just went in there and I sat down and I just said straight out to him, I said, Dr. Aziz, I don't want to study economics anymore. I want to do something creative. I want to be an art major. And, it was a pause. It seemed like forever, but he stared at me with that intense stare, right? Just gazing right at me, trying to intimidate me. And, after a minute, he finally says, with that serious, serious voice, he says, Mr. Turso, and he spoke very slowly. I am your advisor. And my advice to you is to study economics. I told you he was intimidating. So I wanted to ask him, like, is this college or the mafia? Right? And once you join, you can't leave. You're trapped for life. So we sat there again in silence for like a minute, and he lets out a sigh, and finally he signs my form. Right? He signs off, and he lets me go. So I take the form, I thank him, and I bolt out of there as fast as I can, right? Before he changes his mind. And so that was it. Right? I was free. I was free to study art like I wanted to. So, was it the right decision? I think so. But you know, my life, like all of our lives, is a work in progress. Right? It's constantly evolving. Right? It's changing all the time. So we'll just have to see. We'll have to see what happens. But to find out what happens next, for that, you'll have to join me next time.